Are you thankful for the blood? As you all know, we're in this series on old Mr. Samson and his life. And we're just going through his whole life, which is 4 books in Judges. We've made it through chapter 14 so far. So last week, Samson, if you remember right, towards the end of last week that we discussed, Samson headed back to his father's house. At his wedding feast, his bride betrayed him. He was outplayed by 30 Philistines. And in his anger, he killed 30 Philistines to pay back the gambling debt that he'd bet, that he had lost. And went back home with his tail tucked between his legs. So far, everything we've learned about Samson is anything but a good, godly example. Did we all agree with that? So let's go to Judges chapter 15. We're going to go through the whole chapter 15 today. Some verses will hit on a little harder than others, but Judges chapter 15, verse 1. But it came to pass within a while after, in the time of wheat harvest, that Samson visited his wife with a kid. That's a goat. And he said, I will go in to my wife in the chamber. But her father would not suffer him to go in. And her father said, I verily thought that thou hadst utterly hated her. Therefore I gave her to thy companion. Is not her younger sister fairer than she? Take her, I pray thee, instead of her. And Samson said concerning them, Now shall I be more blameless than the Philistines, though I do them a displeasure. And Samson went and caught 300 foxes and took firebrands and turned tail to tail. And he put a firebrand in the midst between 2 tails. Imagine that scene for a moment. And when he had set the brands on fire, and he let them go into the standing corn of the Philistines, and burn up both the shocks and also the standing corn with the vineyards and olives. Then the Philistines said, Who hath done this? And they answered, Samson, the son-in-law of the Temanite, because he had taken his wife and given her to his companion. And the Philistines came up and burnt her and her father with fire. And Samson said unto them, Now ye have done this, yet will I be avenged of you, and after that I will cease. And he smote them hip and thigh with a great slaughter, and he went down and he dwelt in the top of the rock, Etam. Then the Philistines went up and pitched in Judea and spread themselves in Lehi. And the men of Judea said, Why are ye come up against us? And they answered, To bind Samson are we come up, to do to him as he hath done to us. Then 3,000 men of Judea went to the top of the rock, Etam, and said to Samson, Knowest thou not that the Philistines are rulers over us? What is it that thou hast done unto us? And he said unto them, As they did unto me, so have I done unto them. And they said unto him, We are come down to bind thee, that we may deliver thee into the hand of the Philistines. And Samson said unto them, Swear unto me that you will not fail upon me yourselves. Swear unto me that you will not fall upon me yourselves. Verse 13. And they spake unto him, saying, No, but we will bind thee fast and deliver thee into their hand. But surely we will not kill thee. And they bound him with 2 new cords and brought him up from the rock. And when he came unto Lehi, the Philistines shouted against him, and the Spirit of the Lord came mightily upon him. And the cords that were upon his arms became as flax that was burnt with fire, and his bands loosed from off his hands. And he found a new jawbone of an ass, and put forth his hand, and took it, and slew 1,000 men therewith. And Samson did with the jawbone of an ass heaps upon heaps. With the jaw of an ass have I slain 1,000 men. And it came to pass when he had made an end of speaking that he cast away the jawbone out of his hand and called that place Ramathlehi. Maybe. And he was sore athirst and called unto the Lord and said, Thou hast given this great deliverance into the hand of thy servant, and now shall I die for thirst and fall into the hand of the uncircumcised? But God clave the hollow place that was in the jaw, and there came water thereout. And when he had drunk, the spirit came again, and he revived. Wherefore he called the name thereof in Hakkakori, which is in Lehi unto this day. And he judged Israel in the days of the Philistines 20 years. So the gist of this whole chapter is that Samson takes revenge against his enemies. His anger was out of control, and at times, revenge may seem like the only way. But it always turns out worse if we ever try to get revenge. So Samson comes up with a plan. Remember, Samson ran away from his own wedding in anger. He didn't follow through with the marriage. And after some time, he cools off and he decides to make amends with his bride. So he brings her a nice little present, Sylvia. He brings her a goat. Now, I don't know about the rest of you that's here or listening, but if I do something wrong against my wife, I'm probably not going to take her a goat, Joe. I might be in more trouble than I was before I brought her the goat. But in serious note, but think about this time. That goat was probably at some point maybe going to be used for a sacrifice. That goat meant something to him and his family. In today's world, it would be like me upsetting my wife and trying to make amends with her of going out and buying her a fancy perfume or some fancy clothes or the most beautiful flowers you can imagine and maybe some candy or ice cream because that's what will get to her heart. And then take her out to a nice dinner. But seriously, you think about the sacrifice that he was doing to bring her this goat. He had to put time and he put some effort in, he put some thinking into this to bring her this goat. So his plan is to take her to this goat, she'll forgive him, they'll get married after all, and they'll live on happily ever after. That's the plan. But there's a problem. The father-in-law don't like this plan that Samson come up with. And he refuses for Samson to even be allowed to see his daughter. He tells Samson that as far as he's concerned, the wedding is off. It'll never take place. Samson demonstrated a lack of love for his daughter. He had left his daughter at the altar where they were supposed to be getting married at. And he ran back home to his father. So the father assumes, and even the word he uses, that Samson hates her. I can kind of see where this father's coming from. You leave my daughter at the altar when you're supposed to be getting married to her. We're going to move on. So the father-in-law tells Samson, I've already gave her to another man. So then the father comes up with his own plan or proposal, I guess you could say. And he offers Samson to take his younger daughter. Because in the father's eyes, he thinks that his younger daughter is prettier than the daughter that Samson wanted. And he believes Samson didn't love his daughter, that it was just a physical attraction anyways. And if you'll remember back to chapter 13, it says that when Samson saw her, So, he didn't know her, that he just physically had saw her, so that was the attraction, was the physical attraction. So he figures Samson would be more satisfied if he takes the prettier daughter anyways. Samson don't like that idea. So Samson now has been defeated several times by the Philistines. His fiancée had betrayed him, remember at the wedding feast in chapter 14, by convincing Samson of telling her the answer to the riddle, and then when she gets the answer to the riddle, she goes and gives the answer to the Philistines. So she'd betrayed him. And that caused him to lose the bet. So that caused him to go out and have to kill 30 people. And that in turn caused him to lose her, because now the father says, well, you hate her, so I've gave her to someone else. So instead of taking his defeat and going home to regroup and to seek God's will for his life, Samson says, I'm going to get even. So let's look at Samson's motives, or his motivation. What was Samson's true reason why he wanted to get even? Look at what he said in verse 3. The NLT reads it a little different, and I'm even going to kind of change that up. Can you bring up 15:3 in the NLT, Heather? Do I? I don't have it on there. Does anyone have the NLT with them?
Three.
Yep.
Samson said, "This time I cannot be blamed for everything I am going to do."
Nope, that's it. So in my words, I got down here, Samson says, I can't be blamed for what I'm about to do. He's trying to justify his actions, because he's all about himself. If you ain't got that by now from Samson at this point of the last 3 or 4 weeks that we've preached on Samson, Samson's all about Samson. He's concerned about what they have done to him. His motive is a revenge by vanity type motive. He even tries to justify his actions by claiming what they did is worse than what he's going to do. Samson's motivation for attacking the Philistines is all wrong. But here's what I want you to get. He should have been attacking them because they were oppressing the people of Israel. Because remember, in chapter 13, we talked about that Samson was born of a barren woman for a purpose, and that was to save Israel from the Philistines. So Samson had every right to destroy them and attack them, but he's doing it for the wrong reasons. He should have been attacking them because that is what his purpose and God's plan was. To help deliver Israel out of the bondage that the Philistines had put him in. But instead he attacks them because of how they have treated him. He's doing what God called him to do, but he's doing it for all the wrong reasons. Do you see this? Are you following me here? So let's truly, for a moment, pause here and examine our own lives, our motives for serving God. Our motives will determine our faithfulness to Him and our service to Him. When we serve God to get some benefit in return, is our devotion truly to God? If we are coming to church, putting money in the offering plate, doing what God's called us to do, for any other reason than for who God is, our motives are wrong. If someone goes to church because they feel obligated to, or maybe they go there because, well, I get to see Grandma and Grandpa on that day, or we're going to go to Grandma and Grandpa's after lunch, so I've got to go to church, so I'm more welcome at the lunch, or they go to there to socialize with some friends, or they go there, how about this one, to maybe catch up on some of the weekly gossip. We laugh, but let's get real. Then they're going for the wrong reasons. And if they're going for those reasons, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that eventually they're going to stop going because their desires are in the wrong spot. So eventually they're going to say, well, forget about it. I could do something else on Sunday anyway. This isn't any fun anymore. This is getting old. This is wore me out. So now let's go on to someone serves in the church to receive some type of benefit. And if you don't think that's going on in today's world, you better open your eyes up. There's many evangelists out there today. Pastors, preachers, evangelists, whatever you want to call them, ministers. That the only reason that they even open this book up to stand up here to preach the Word of God is to fill this thing right here up. There's others out there that are doing it to get some type of gratitude or after the service, they want everyone to circle around them and say, oh man, that was such a great message and high five and they get some type of excitement out of that. Now, anyone that's stood up here and preached or shared even a testimony or anything that's been on their heart, Brother Joe, it is nice for people to say, man, I really enjoyed that. I got something out of it. But let's give credit to where credit's due, and that's to God. I don't get any of the credit for what's being done up here when I stand up here. I don't care if I'm preaching to 1,000 people and 10% of them, 100 of them end up at the altar and they end up getting saved that day and surrendering their life to Christ. I get no credit for that. All I'm doing is being obedient to what God's called me to do. And if I'm doing it for those reasons, if they're doing it for those reasons, they're doing it for the wrong reasons. I'm doing it because I love God. I thank Him for His grace and His mercy and His forgiveness. And I want to be obedient to Him. I want to love Him back. He loved me first, and I want to show that reflection and love Him also. And if we're doing it for the wrong reasons, we're going to fail. And you say, well, but you mentioned TV evangelists a while ago, and maybe you got some people's names going through your mind right now of some of them. And they're out here building $1 million homes and have private jets and whatever else. So it don't look like they're failing. When they hit the gates to eternity, I'm not saying they're going to enter in or depart from me. I'm not the judge. I don't know their hearts. But I do know that if their motive is for any other reason, then their heart's probably in the wrong spot. And they might hear something that they don't want to hear. Because the Bible also tells me that there's going to be those type of people then. False prophets, false teachers, false preachers. Those aren't going to hear enter in. They will hear depart from me. And that's the biggest failure you can ever have. You think falling on this earth is bad. That's a failure that I sure don't want to experience. So Samson, he has some kind of different methods to get his revenge here. I mean, like I said when I was reading through that, truly get that picture in your head. He's determined to get his revenge, and he's going to do whatever means is necessary to get his revenge. You go out and you catch 300 foxes. I've never tried to tie two foxtails together, but I can imagine that they're probably not just going to lay down and let you do that. But he ties their tails together, so now he's got 150 pairs of them. And then he puts a torch between their tails. And then he sets them free. And of course, any wild animal at this point, your tail's tied to another tail with a torch between you, they're going to run around like crazy. And they go through and they run around and they burn down all the fields, all the vineyards. They burn everything down. So think about the blow to the Philistines that was. It says in the very beginning there that it was harvest time when he done this. All the financial loss that they lost because of all this being burned up, because of what Samson's done. It's not like they, in today's world, with our currency, lost a dollar bill. It'd be like us losing millions. I mean, literally losing millions of dollars. Because it didn't say that it burned up a percentage. He burned up all their fields, their vineyards, their olives, everything that could produce something for financial reasons and to feed their own families, they've now lost. So not only are they losing their financial part of it, they're losing what they was going to keep for their families also. So Samson has his revenge. And I could see Samson being his selfish little self thinking, well, it's all over now. I got him. I can picture that. But boy, is he wrong. The Philistines are upset for losing their crops, rightfully so. So they start asking around town. They're running through town asking, well, who did this? And finally they figure out that it was Samson. And being the wicked, selfish people they are themselves, they instantly want vengeance. They want their own revenge. So instead of confronting Samson face to face and trying to see if they can work all this out, they attack Samson through other people. They take his wife and her father and they burn them alive. Now that's a terrible scene to think of, people being burnt alive for what Samson done. But the truth about revenge is that it just keeps escalating. It's just a big snowball effect. When someone They always want to outdo what was outdone or done to them. Kind of got ahead of myself there in my notes. But anyway, so someone does or says something about us. Sometimes we'll respond back with even harsher actions or harsher words. And if it goes on until long enough and it just keeps snowballing, like I said, then eventually lives will be ruined, reputations will be ruined, relationships will be destroyed. And it's never God's will for us to seek revenge against ones that hurt us. Matter of fact, I didn't write the scriptures down, but there's many different scriptures that talks about that the revengeance is God's. It's not ours. It's not up to us of what punishment or whatever you want to say that those people are going to get. It's up to God. So when Samson hears about the death of his wife and her family, he takes things to another level. He killed them all with a donkey's jawbone. Is that not what it said? I mean, so he retaliates against them. And often the world seeks to retaliate the same way. Like I said, they're always wanting to one-up the other person. They always want to take it to another level. And I can think back in times of just being transparent with everyone. If someone has said or tried to do something to me that was hurtful, and that has happened, I can honestly sit here and say that I don't think a thought ever really even crossed my mind of going out and getting revenge against that person. The thoughts always crossed my mind of, well, why would they do that? I tried to figure out what their motive was. But again, being transparent with you, let's flip that, because it's happened. Someone says or does something to one of my children or one of my family members, I instantly think of, I'm going to get them back. This is fixing to get ugly. Because now you've overstepped. You do to me what you want, but leave my family alone. Just being honest with you. I ain't had those thoughts or feelings for a long time. But it has happened in the past, and I'm sure if we was going to be real with ourselves, and we could all probably sit there and think of a time that revengeance at least came into our mind if we didn't proceed on with action. So Samson's reasons for revenge are purely selfish. It wasn't for the nation of Israel like it should have been. It wasn't for God like it should have been. It wasn't for the Lord's glory, but it was all about Samson. But I want us to still get a grasp of verse 14. We're going to go back. And when he came unto Lehi, the Philistines shouted against him, and the Spirit of the Lord came mightily upon him. And the cords that were upon his arms became as flax that was burnt with fire, and his bands loosed from off his hands. So he's bound up, can't get away. But when the Spirit of the Lord came upon him, it was like that literally just fell off of him. Like the change of bondage was gone. So I wanted to go back to that verse and say that even with everything that we've learned about Samson up to this point, God still has his blessing upon Samson. He still has the Spirit of the Lord, it says, come upon him. God still has not forsaken him. God has still not left Samson just out there to hang himself, for lack of better words. God still says, Samson, I've still got your back. I'm still here for you. And I'm sure Joe knows the story leading up to this, but all the rest of you that's been here for this series and the details that we went into, think back to everything that Samson has done up to this point. All the wrong that he's done. And God's still right there with him. God still got him. The Spirit of the Lord still came upon him, moved in his life. And some people would say, but why? Well, because we're going to get there in the next chapter. I don't know if it'll be next week or the week after. We're going to get to the next chapter next week. But when we get to the part of why, but from Samson's birth, I go back to again that Samson's mother was barren. She could not have children. And God came to her and said, an angel come down and spoke to her and said, you are going to have a child. And not only are you going to have a child, you're going to have a son. And we've talked about back to even in that day that in their minds, just how it worked back then. Not that men are better than women, but you still wanted to have a son. You could have 3 or 4 daughters before you had a son, but you still wanted that son. There was just something about having a son. He was born for a divine purpose. But I'm going to tell you that every one of us are born for a divine purpose. An angel might not have come and talked to my mother, but I was still born for a divine purpose. If I will allow God to do the work in me. And I look back on my life, and I've shared this with, I think, everyone here for sure, but I was called to preach when I was 16 years old. Preached my first sermon just a few weeks after I turned 16. But Joe, there was a time in my life, even after I was called to preach, that what we call today that I'd backslid or I whatever. Well, I call it what it is I'd left the field for serving God and I'd ran off. But God had left the 99 multiple times to come back and bring me back home. Because like I said last week, once that calling is upon your life, only one person can take that calling away. And that's God. No one else can. Samson did the same boat. He was born for a purpose. He was called for God's purpose. And the only one that could remove that calling from Samson's life was God. But God still hung right in there in verse 14 and said, Samson, I still got your back. I'm still here for you. And remember at one point, and I don't remember what verse it was, or maybe even in chapter, but I think it was in chapter 13, towards the very end when it says that God moved him. And we talked about that word there, moved, literally meant to thrust or to push. Sometimes sometimes our lives are like Samson's, and when the Spirit of God comes upon us, it's for a reason. It's because it has to kind of push us along to keep us on track, to keep us going in God's will. And the last verse I want to hit on in a little more detail here is verse 18. And he was sore athirst and called on the Lord. Would you be a little thirsty after everything that Samson's done here? After killing these men with the jawbone of a donkey going through and slaying all them men with literally a jawbone of a donkey. I'd say we'd all be a little thirsty after such an ordeal as that. Called on the Lord and said, Thou hast given this great deliverance into the hand of thy servant. And now shall I die for thirst and fall into the hand of the uncircumcised. Brian, read that in the NLT. 18.
Samson was now very thirsty, and he cried out to the Lord, You have accomplished this great victory by the strength of your servant. Lest I now die of thirst and fall into the hands of these pagans.
So Samson's called upon God because he's thirsty, but then turned around basically and says, God, I done all this. He don't even give God credit for giving him the strength to do what he's done. But God still gives him all the water that he needs to drink. God still answered when he called out to him. So once again, we see that God's not left Samson. God's not forsaken Samson. God's not forgotten about what Samson's calling is. If anything, God is still at this point moving upon him. He's still trying to push Samson along, get Samson back to what Samson's called to do. Heather, play some altar music. I don't know where any of you are